Hello, I'm Dr. Ron England, and I'm going to take you through a lecture on how to process form input. And I'm going to start with a previous lecture where I had a HTML5 form. I've made a few changes to the HTML5 form, and the changes are very simple. In the situations where I had the individual fields that you were inputting, name, color, date, email, number, and range, I simply added a name attribute to each of those. So the name of the first one was name, then the second one was color, third one is date, the fourth one is email, fifth one is number, and sixth one is range. And I kind of just did those names just so that it matches the type so that you could actually see the types very easily. Now, of course, you can name them whatever you want to name them, and I would go with logical names in pretty much every situation that you have. So if you were to look at this, this would be what the form would look like in Google Chrome. And since I used the HTML5 elements that are supported in Google Chrome, you can kind of see that I have this ability to have these nice little pick capability, and email addresses are validated. So it's all pretty straightforward. Now, when I submit this, I have a different action that I'm taking here. I'm returning this to another form. And the second form is called HTML form request. The name of this one is just simply HTML form, and HTML form request is going to process this input. So, in other words, what will happen is when I hit the submit button, it's actually going to open up the HTML page, HTML form request, and it's going to send the information from this page to that page. So the easiest way to show this is just simply to click Submit. And if you look at the URL in this, and I'll make it large enough so that you can see pretty much the URL, you can see that there's a lot of information up here on that URL. So in other words, you have name equals, and that was the name I entered my name, and color equals, and date equals. That is simply taking the input from the form and putting it into the URL, or the URI in this case, we also call them URIs, of the form that's being called. Now, when that is done, you can process this. And we're going to look at that processing. So I'm going to go back over here to this, and I'm going to close my original form that did the validation and sent it. And let's see, click that, close it, and we're going to look at where the processing occurs. Now, if you look at this form, HTML form request, you can see that on the page I have a lot of information that's being output to this page. Well, that's information I wrote to the page to demonstrate how this works, and we'll go step by step and show each of those. Okay, so the first thing that I did is I have a blank body to the page HTML form request. There's nothing in there. I'm going to actually write all of the contents using JavaScript. On the onload, which is an action, an event that occurs, on the onload event, I call a JavaScript function called setup. Up here I've got the function setup, and in this setup I just have some simple statements where I do some different actions here. So in the first one I use the document.writeLine, and I write a little bit of text, basically put a paragraph tag in and a closed paragraph, but I put the variable location up there, and that is a JavaScript defined variable. That is the location, the actual full URI path of what is being opened. So here you can see I've got location colon, and in this case I'm doing this on the local machine, so it is a file. It's not an HTTP location, it's a file location. It's got the full path. Then it's got a question mark. Okay, that question mark is the delimiting to show that you've got extra information other than just the file. So the file itself is this first part, and then the rest of it is actually is what we call the location.search, but it is parameters passed to the URI that can then be processed. So I have name, color, date, and if you notice, it's the same names with an equal sign and a value, but it's the same names that you had back in the previous document when we were pulling it from the form. And to get that, you simply print here, this variable location. So it's the location variable. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper than this. I actually only want to look at the part after the question mark. But that is accessible through a JavaScript variable, location.search. So if I print out with the document write line the location.search, I only get that portion of the location. So it's the name, color, date, email, number, and range with the values that are associated with that too. If you look at this though, you'll notice that it's encoded. That %23 is actually the pound sign. So I'm going to show you another little trick here, or not really a trick, but it's another JavaScript function. I'm going to decode the URI, and I can do that through a JavaScript function that is a built-in function called decode URI component. By the way, there's also an encode URI component that encodes it. Now the reason for this decoding and encoding is pretty simple. Some characters like the pound sign and the equal sign and the ampersand sign, there's characters that have specific meaning in a URL. And to be able to put them in a URL, you simply need to encode them as something else. So for example, what if I had typed in, and I'm going to show you this, I'm going to actually do it. If I go back to my original HTML form, let's go back. Suppose I typed in my name as Ron equals Eaglin, and then I submitted this. Well, the equals sign would have been translated as an equal that is separating a name-value pair if it was done as an equal sign. But if you look over here at the search, you'll see that the Ron has then a %3D, okay, which is actually the equal sign, and then the Eaglin. And this is the encoded version of this. The decoded version of this has the Ron equals Eaglin. That's the decoding of the %3D. So you can see that the automated encoding and decoding of URI information is important, but also realize that you have the ability to encode and decode these yourself. Now, this string that you have here, this search string, has these ampersands that separate each of the individual fields that are in this. So each field is separated. And if you look at the way that it's designed, it's got the name. It starts with a question mark, which separates the URL from the search portion. It has the name, which is the name, and then the value. And then you have color, which is a name, and then you have a value. Date and a value. So they're date-value pairs separated by an equal sign. And in this case, since there were 6 fields, there's 6 of them. Well, what I want to do is I want to split them. So I have a built-in string function called split. Now, what I'm going to split is the location.search. That returns the string, that is the string that I want to split up into those 6 different things. So if I do location.search.split, I'm calling the function split, and I'm setting that equal to the variable, in this case, the variable SL. Okay. The split string looks a lot like the other string, except that in this case, when I print out the split string, I just have a comma separating each of the individual strings that are there. But what I'm actually more interested in is showing you how to get to an individual split string. So in this case, if you look here at the SL and then the element 0 in the array, because the split string, by the way, is an array, when I print the array up, it just prints the elements of the array separated by a comma. In this case, I'm going to be able to print a single element of the array by simply putting SL of 0. So over here, the first element, which is 0 reference, they start at 0, is name, the full part, question mark, name equals Ron Eaglin. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make a change to this and show what happens here. If I change this to 1, okay, and save it, now I go back over to here, okay, and then I enter, I submit the same thing, and I'm going to go ahead and take that equal sign out, and then I submit, okay. In this case, in the first element, whoops, let's go back over here. The first element now which is now actually the first element, it's the second element, I just didn't change the text, is the color one. So by changing that value from 0 to 1, I change this from the name to the color. And then I, of course, can reference 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Now, if you want to know how to find out how many elements are in that array, you simply use the array sl.length. In this case, it's going to return the length is 6, but remember, it's 0 reference. So you have to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there's still 6 elements. Okay. And then lastly, I wanted to say, well, how can I actually get to the value, get rid of the name of that one? Well, if I take, let's go backwards and do 0 again. If I take the Ron Eaglin, it's actually name equals Ron Eaglin, and I split on the equal sign, okay, I'm going to split on the equal sign of that element 0, I can now show the value. The split's going to have, the split variable here is going to have, in this case, it's going to be a length of 2, and it's going to be 0 and 1 for how to access it. And if I go to the split of 1, I should get just the first element value here, which is this one here. So now if I go back and resubmit, first element value. And I'll go ahead and add one line in here so you can kind of see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and add another line here. Instead of the first element value, I'm going to do, it's a name value pair, so I'll go first element name, and we'll show 0. So I'll save that, go back over here, rerun it. Okay, so your first element name was question mark name. Now remember, I didn't remove the question mark, and I normally would do this if I was looking for name value pairs. It's not that hard to remove the question mark from this. There's plenty of string functions allowing you to do it. And then the first element value, and notice that it actually put the plus there to show that there was a space in that. And you have ways of encoding and decoding to get rid of these things. But this was designed to show you very straightforward how do you get hold of and use the different parameters that are being sent over from the previous form to the second form, in this case, which was called a GET request. And this GET request has these values here. So that's all I'm going to show you for this lecture. It should be enough to get you started with actually processing, being able to, in a form, process any information that's encoded in the URL of the form. Thanks very much. Good programming.